Hello, this is Jerry Hall, science teacher in Fauquier County. I think you're hearing a pileated woodpecker up there. I think that's the call I'm hearing, but not so sure. But I'm out here at Whitney Forest again, and I'm by one of the little creeks here, one of the streams that runs through Whitney Forest. So a stream is part of the water cycle. The water cycle is a bunch of words that end in ation. So you have evaporation, where water from the ground and from the ocean and from lakes and rivers becomes a gas, and it evaporates into the atmosphere. And then when it gets up high, it condenses. That's called condensation, and it condenses into the clouds. And then when the clouds build up and there's too much water in the clouds, it falls out, and that's called precipitation. And precipitation would be things like rain and snow and sleet and hail, things like that. And then, of course, it collects on the ground, and that's called accumulation. So the water that collects on the ground can either be collected in groundwater underground, or it can be collected in puddles or ponds or rivers or lakes or anything like that. And so the water that collects on the ground tends to follow certain paths because of where gravity pulls it. So gravity pulls water down, and water forms streams, and then the streams get bigger and bigger, and then they flow into rivers, and the rivers flow into bays and inlets and gulfs, and of course those flow into the ocean. So the water cycle is continual. It picks up again where it left off. So it's kind of hard to tell. I was looking at a watershed map, and I believe that this part of Fauquier County is on the Rappahannock side of the watershed. So this stream probably ends up in the Rappahannock River, which then ends up in the Chesapeake Bay and the Atlantic Ocean. The northern and eastern half of Fauquier County, just over half of the county, is in the Potomac River watershed. So creeks that are flowing that direction will end up in the Potomac River, and eventually into the Chesapeake Bay, and again into the Atlantic Ocean. So the this entire area is part of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So when water is actually very powerful, and when it's moving, it creates weathering, erosion, and deposition. So the faster the water's moving, the more of this stuff happens. Right now, this creek is very calm. But when it rains a lot, I'm sure it flows a lot faster, and it carves away the edges of the creek. That's called weathering, wearing away. And it carries pieces called sediment with it downstream. Sediment can be these big rocks if the water is powerful enough in a river, or it can be something as small as sand or silt or mud that you can't really see the individual pieces. When sediment's carried along, that's called erosion. And you can see evidence of erosion that's happened in this stream here. So when water slows down, it tends to drop off this sediment, and that's called deposition. It deposits it, and it creates in little floodplains like the one I'm standing on here, where plants that require a lot of moisture will grow. Plants like this moss and some of this grass. It's also a good place for animals to come down and get a drink, and you've seen, I see evidence of animals coming down here, like this white-tailed deer footprint, and perhaps a fox or a coyote footprint over there. So weathering, erosion, and deposition are constantly happening, and water is one of the agents that cause those things to happen. So thank you for joining me on Science at Home in Whitney Forest with Mr. Hall. And as always, science is all around us.